All right, everybody. My name is Dana Altmeyer, and I am the Director of Communications for Lawrence Township Schools. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm sorry we weren't able to meet in person, but a virtual platform is better than no platform at all. This is our second event for the calendar year, and this is actually a follow-up to a conversation that we had early in 2020 that was really well received, and we had a lot of families indicate that they would love more on this particular topic. So we're pleased to bring back Mr. Mark Pardue. He is the district prevention liaison, and he's going to talk a little bit more about himself, obviously, when we turn it over to him. There is a chat box where throughout the presentation, if you have questions, you are welcome to type them there. But given the small number of folks that we have active, we are also okay with you just asking the question. If we get above 10 or so people, we'll just switch to chat only. But since we're at a lower number, that actually has its advantages and we can have more of a dialogue. So at this time, it is my pleasure to turn things over to Mr. Mark Pardue.
All right, thank you, Dana. Before I get started, I just want to give you a little bit of information about myself, let you know my background and kind of what qualifies me to be talking to you about this. So I actually started off my career as an English teacher for both junior high and high school. I got a lot of kids that were having issues with, parents, issues with drugs, issues with alcohol. And so, it started to really bother me. And I wanted to kind of help them in a way that I couldn't before. So I went back to school and I got my master's degree in social work. And from there, that allowed me to become a licensed therapist and licensed social worker. I've worked everywhere from the Department of Children's Services, providing home-based services and home-based therapy, all the way to working in an addictions hospital on an inpatient wing. So what I'm going to be giving you, I'm going to be giving you a lot of information today about our topic, which is, how you can intervene and support your kids as they're dealing with drugs and alcohol. But I'm going to be giving you a lot of case studies and stories that go along with that. If my time as a teacher taught me anything, it's that, I can throw data and facts at you all day long, but it's really stories that teach. So that's what I'm going to be giving you. The names and the details of these stories have been altered to protect the identity of the people within. But these are real stories that represent the stages of change and kind of what we're going to be talking about. So again, we're going to be talking today about the stages of change. Now, the topic of this presentation is, what you can do about drugs. And to know what you can do, you have to be able to understand and recognize the stages of change and the stages of recovery when dealing with drugs and alcohol. Every single person that is dealing with an addiction or even a substance use disorder, they go through the exact same 6 stages as they get from use all the way to sustained sobriety. The presentation of a person in each stage is different. How that person acts is different. How that person receives information from you is different. And so by understanding how those stages function and where that person's mindset is when they're in that stage, you can have a better and more productive conversation with them. So let's look at the first one. The first stage is what we call pre-contemplation. So the root there, contemplation, pre-contemplation, basically means you're not thinking about it yet. You haven't yet had that issue where you thought your use was a problem. You really haven't been burned badly enough by it to think that you need to stop what you're doing. This stage is denial. That's a really common trope with addictions and recovery where a person starts off in denial. This is what they're talking about. The individual in this stage denies there's an issue. Now, this might seem like a familiar place. You go through your kiddo's room, you might find something that you need to talk to them about, be it, a vape rig, bottles, whatever, and then they deny it. That's not mine, that's my friend's, whatever. And, even if you catch them red-handed, they still deny that there's an issue. I talk to kids about, using marijuana, THC products pretty much every day. And most of those conversations are, conversations of denial. That it's not that big of an issue. It's a plant, it grows out of the ground, blah, 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 blah. So they don't really see that this is a dangerous thing. Now, when I think about denial, I think about this woman that I worked with really, really, really early in my career. I was a brand new baby social worker, fresh out of my practicum, and I really didn't know anything about anything. So I got this case because this mom had been arrested after trying to pick up her daughter. And it was discovered that she was under the influence of alcohol. Now, I got the police report and I got the social worker's report before I went for my first session of therapy with her. And I knew from that police report that the situation was actually pretty dire. They had, an argument before, and, the mom wanted to pick up the kiddo to kind of talk things over and make things right. Problem was, again, when she went in to pick up her kid, it was very, very, very clear that she was under the influence of alcohol. The secretary kind of called her out on that, and she got very aggressive and disruptive. At that point, the secretary asked her to go wait outside. She said, if you, just pull your car up to the front door, stay in your car, and we'll bring your kid out, and then you can leave. Now, those of you in the audience, if you feel like that's a little set up-ish, that's because it was. The very next thing that they do is the secretary called the police, and an officer pulled up behind her and asked her to step out of the vehicle and breathalyzed her. And she blew numbers that were pretty astronomical. I think it was it was extremely high. But when I actually sat down to talk with her, she was denying that any of this happened. She said that she was not under the influence of alcohol, that she was not drunk whatsoever. And when I asked her about, what about these charges? What about, the breathalyzer test? What about this? What about that? She had all of these stories and all of these excuses and all these things to make it sound like it was better than it was, all the way up to, showing me her driver's license, which she was keeping in a Ziploc bag, and telling me that, she was preserving the fingerprints on the driver's license because the officer was trying to frame her. So I asked her to unpack that. And she said that, she had only had like 4 bottles of wine that morning, and that's not enough to get anybody drunk. So how could she be under the influence of alcohol? And clearly the officer was drunk. Clearly the officer blew into the breathalyzer ahead of time. And, that's where all these numbers came from. And she was convinced, that she was going to sue the police department, she was going to sue the school, and that all of this was just an enormous misunderstanding. Now, here's the scary part about all of this. So I mentioned that I started off my career as an English teacher. I mentioned that I taught junior high, I taught high school, and I'm a therapist. So my bullcrap detector is kind of through the roof. Don't play poker with me, I kind of clean up. But when I was talking with her, she absolutely believed what she was telling me. Every word out of her mouth, she had convinced herself that that was true. That's what we look at when we see pre-contemplation. Now, a lot of parents and a lot of guardians get really frustrated when their kid is, staring them in the face and saying, I don't have an issue. This is not a big deal. I don't know why you're freaking out about this. They get frustrated because they think that their kiddo is lying to them. But really, that's not what's going on. It's not that they're lying to you as much as it is that they're lying to themselves. They don't want to believe that there's a problem, because if there's a problem, then they have to change. They don't want to change. So not only are they going to tell you whatever it takes, but they're going to give you every single lie and justification that they've been telling themselves over the past however long they've been using to tell themselves that what they're doing is okay. You can't really reason with that. Now, that brings us to a part of pre-contemplation that we need to talk about, which is the false consensus effect. Now, I guarantee you that you have heard these arguments before. The false consensus effect is the false belief that your level of use, or your use at all, is normal when compared to your peers. So how many times have you heard that before? Like, everybody in school smokes weed. Well, yeah, no, they don't. They super don't. The data does not support that. Everybody at school drinks. No, they don't. Maybe your friends do, maybe your peers do, but the truth is that they, by and large, kids aren't really doing that. People who are in this pre-contemplative phase, they need to believe that what they're doing is completely normal. Now, the other part of this false consensus effect is they will find people that are worse off than themselves. And not only will they point to that person to say that what they're doing is okay, but they will use that person and be around that person to make themselves feel better about what they're doing. So yeah, I might smoke weed every day, but at least I'm not out there doing what so-and-so is doing. I might drink and go to class drunk, but at least I'm not out there doing what so-and-so is doing. And as long as they can point that finger out, they can feel better about their own level of use. So it just keeps them in this lie. Now, again, when we're talking about substance use disorder and we're talking about addiction, you need to understand that we're not talking about a behavior. Okay, it stops becoming about a choice after those first initial uses. Once that addictive substance starts to take hold, we're no longer, putting a kid in the driver's seat on if they're going to use or not. They get their cravings, they get their desire to use, and sometimes that can be incredibly powerful, especially when they're going out, seeing their friends use in front of them. So we really can't, put that onus on them. And we have to understand that when they're in these early stages and they're not ready to see that they have a problem, confrontation with them only makes that a lot worse. Now, there's a little bit of good news here, because once you stay in that pre-contemplative place long enough and you start having a lot of conversations and you start getting burned and you start getting in trouble, and your parents start searching your room enough that they're finding stuff, or maybe they're even going out and buying drug screens, then you really start to question your own behavior. You really start to question, all right, why am I not stopping even though I'm getting in all this trouble? Why am I not stopping even though my grades are going down the toilet? So that enters them into a phase that we call contemplation. Contemplation, literally, they're thinking about it. Now, before I get into contemplation, I want to talk to you about the term ambivalence. So people use this term wrong all the time. They think that ambivalence means that, that you just don't care about it, or it doesn't really mean anything to you. That's not true. When you're ambivalent, you care a lot, but the problem is that you have two non-compatible truths that are operating at the same time. So two things that cannot be true together, but somehow exist. And for a person who is in contemplation, they're simultaneously holding the knowledge that their use is a problem, that weed is really starting to affect their lives in a way that they don't want, that their alcohol use or whatever it is that they're turning to is starting to burn them more than it is to help them with whatever reason they started using in the first place. But then at the same time, they don't want to stop. They know it's bad and they know it's ruining their lives and getting there, but they don't want to abandon their friends, or they don't really think that they can stop at this point, or they're scared about being left out of things. So that ambivalence is literally being torn in half between those two truths. So how do you decide? Do I go down the path of recovery and try to get my life back in order? Or do I keep doing what I've been doing this whole time because it's comfortable and it's really what makes me feel good in the moment? So that's where we see a lot of people struggle. Now, the first time that I ever encountered that, it was back when I was doing home-based therapy for DCS. And I was working with this mom, and she was definitely pre-contemplation for a really long time. I was working with her for several months. And, her issue was with pain pills. And I would sit down with her once a week and we'd talk about it. And I'd say, like, have you noticed that you're having a lot of issue holding a job? Well, yeah, but I hurt my back and I need my pills. Okay, but you're buying those pills on the street and all your money is going there. So you don't really have money to like even clothe yourself or feed yourself. Well, yeah, but my pain is really bad and I need those pills. Well, yeah, but and it just kept going back and forth until she really started running out of excuses. And that my back hurts, and that excuse of, this is what I've been doing, turned into the truth, which was, I'm afraid to stop. I'm afraid to be different. I'm afraid of failing. And I sat with her in my office and watched her absolutely break down over that. She hit what we call a light bulb moment. Maybe you've heard the term before, rock bottom moment. I hate that term. There's a couple terms in addictions and recovery that I absolutely cannot stand. Junkie is one, drunk is another, because they're pejoratives. The other is rock bottom. It's a really dangerous thing to think, because if we tell people that they need to wait until they hit rock bottom, guess what? They're going to wait until they hit rock bottom. They're going to wait until there is nothing left and their life is in ruins, because that false consensus effect is going to come in and say, well, I'm not that bad. Well, I still have my job. Well, I still haven't been kicked out of school. Well, my wife hasn't left me yet. So obviously I don't need to change. There's no reason to wait. When we change that and reframe it to that light bulb moment, that just means that they realize that they're ready to have that change. Now, like I said, I sat with her in my office when she had her light bulb moment, and I just sat there with her and allowed her to have that moment and allowed her to sit there and to feel that. And, she burst into tears because she was finally ready to move on, finally ready to do what she needed to do. It was one of the highlights of my career. That brought her to a phase that we call preparation. Now, preparation can also be a pretty frustrating phase because it gives parents and guardians a lot of hope that things are going to be better, but it's kind of like false starts. So, preparation is a phase of intensity and intense action and emotion, but with absolutely no plan. If you've heard the trope of, pouring your alcohol down the sink or throwing your pills in the toilet, that's all preparation, but there's no plan behind that. I've worked with, kids even in this role who gets very excited about wanting to change and wanting to stop smoking, wanting to stop using THC. I had one kid that was so excited. He said, yeah, Mr. Pardue, after talking to you, I went home and I took my stuff and I buried it out in the backyard. Well, what do you think he did a couple of days later? He dug it up. And when you pour your alcohol down the sink, if that's all that you do and you don't treat the addiction that lies underneath, what are you going to do right after you pour that out? You're going to go buy more. And just, when you throw your pills away and you get that craving and you get that itch and you need it, you start feeling that dope sickness come on. What are you going to do? You're going to go get more. That's the problem with preparation. Again, it gives families hope because we see our loved ones stand up and get ready. And, there's a big dramatic intervention moment where they're getting rid of all their stuff. And then a day or two goes by and they're right back where they were and they're not answering the phone anymore. It can be a real problem. The issue with preparation is that while you have motivation, you don't have that plan. Everything you're doing is symbolic. It's impulsive. You're not really thinking about how you're going to maintain this because you can decide that you're going to stop using. You can decide that, you're going to throw your cigarettes away and be different and, get your grades up, whatever. But it's the keeping to that is the difficult part. Addiction doesn't work in such a way where you can just choose, I'm going to be done with this now. So what you as a parent or guardian or someone who cares about someone whose addiction can do when you see your loved one pouring their bottles down the sink, burying their stash in the backyard, you can encourage that. And you can pat them on the back for that and applaud them for the symbol of getting rid of their drug of choice. And then you can help them to make a plan so that they stick with that. Now, you're going to hear, I'm just not going to do it anymore. I'm just going to, have willpower. I'm just going to, white knuckle it. I'm just going to be strong and I'll be okay. You're going to hear that a lot. Don't trust willpower. We don't really look at willpower the right way. Willpower is not a part of your character. Willpower is not a part of who you are. It is a finite resource. There are days where you have willpower and there are days where you do not. Don't trust that version of you where you don't have that willpower to not go back out to the store and pick up another bottle. Don't trust that, non-motivated version of you because you've had a bad day or you got stressed out or this happened or that happened or this happened or that happened to not go back to your old ways. So again, the best thing that you can do when you hit that moment or your loved one hits that moment where they're throwing away all their drugs and, they're, vowing that they're going to be different, help them make that plan. Now the question is, how do you do that? That brings us to action. Action is probably the most difficult phase. And here's where I tell you that you can slide backwards. This isn't like a ladder where you just keep climbing up and up and up. You can come all the way to that preparation phase and then slide right back to pre-contemplation where you're saying you're fine. You can get right up to action and then have an issue, have an argument, whatever, have a trigger that's hard enough and then slide all the way back down. So it's important that you come up with a plan of action as soon as you possibly can. Don't wait. Like I said, don't trust willpower. So action is where you're actually doing something. The phrase here that I hear a lot that I look for when I know someone's in action is, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. A person that's in action is willing to do whatever it takes to be free from their drug. They're not going to fight you if you say, all right, well, I just popped on Amazon and found out that I can buy 25 tests for $16. So I'm going to buy these drug tests. Not that I don't trust you, but I want you to know that I have these and I'm going to use them. They're not going to fight you when you say that. If you tell them, all right, if you really want to be different and you really want to stop drinking or you really want to stop smoking every day, let's go get you assessed. Let's go talk to our family physician. Let's go talk to the doctor. Let's go make a plan with a professional and really work on you being in recovery. A person who's going to fight you on that and say, no, not right now, not right now. That's not a person, that's an action. That's a person who's talking because they're in preparation. Action is actually doing things. So what does action look like? It's really different for everybody, and there's a lot of treatment options. I'm not going to sit here and be arrogant enough to tell you that, you should do this first, this second, this third. Everyone's a little bit different. So the best advice that I can give you is to go talk to a professional. Don't make that decision on your own. Don't let them make that decision on their own. Talk to somebody who's devoted their life to the study of addiction, the study of substance use, and who knows what to do. That is anybody wearing scrubs. Your family physician, PCP, nurse practitioner, school counselors can help you with that. Your family liaisons can help you with that. And I'm here in the district as well to help you with that too. There's awesome facilities out there such as Fairbanks, Valley Vista. Community North has an amazing system that they have to help people get off. But that first step, again, is going in to get that assessment to see exactly where things are. So remember, I was talking before, way back in pre-contemplation, that false consensus effect where you think your level of use is normal. It takes a really long time for that to go away. And sometimes you run into kids who think, that they weren't really that bad when they were kind of scary bad. I've talked to kids who will tell me like, no, I only smoke like every day. It's not like I'm smoking 4 or 5 times a day. Well, that's bad. If you're smoking every day, that's, kind of scary. Or kids that say like, I only, drink every couple of days. Well, that's for your age, quite a lot. Like that's definitely something that you should go look at. So even when you reach that place where you've decided enough is enough, you're going to cut back. A lot of times people struggle with remembering what an appropriate level or a safe level of use is. And for a kid, a teenager, anyone under the age of 18, 21, what have you, it's really nothing. It should be nothing. So step one, first thing that you can do as a parent or guardian, if your kid is really serious about changing what they're doing and stopping their level of use, have them say that. Have them say it out loud. Make a big deal about it. That's one of the best moments when I'm working with a kid is when we sit in my office and I say, all right, you want to be done? I want to hear you say it. Tell me that you're done. And then they do. And they feel relieved. So make that symbol happen. Pick a date and make it soon. Now, here's my therapy trick for you. The sooner you schedule something and the more concrete that date is, the more likely that you are to actually go and do that thing. Now, if you don't believe me, go step into my garage because I was supposed to clean that up way back in April. I told my wife that I would organize it in a few days. There's still no concrete date on that. There probably never will be. Make that concrete date. It is a whole lot easier to hold yourself accountable and to get ready if you know when you're going and you stick to it. Again, talk with your counselor, to set up an individual plan. I'm a big fan of, family therapy. I'm a big fan of talking to a professional, and that's somebody who can, guide you through this every step of the way. I have a lot of respect for our family liaisons here in the school. The work that they do is absolutely astounding, and the level of hustle they have is admirable. The same goes for our school counselors. They're incredibly knowledgeable people, and when you go to them with an issue like this, they know the numbers to call, and they can walk with you every step of the way so that you and your loved one aren't there by yourselves trying to make that work. One thing I also always recommend, I've said it a couple times, talk to your doctor. Your doctor is going to have a better understanding of how these substances, whatever substance your loved one is using, how that's affecting their body. They might have a conversation with your loved one about, what the effects of that substance are, but they're also going to know, what levels of use are absolutely problematic. They're going to be able to give you a better idea of what level of services you should go look for, and give you some expert advice in there as well. They can also help you with withdrawal. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't think about is that if you're stopping a substance, and I mean any substance, any drug, you're going to have withdrawal symptoms. That goes for alcohol. That goes for, the big ones like heroin, meth, cocaine, all of those clearly. have withdrawal symptoms, but so do THC. THC has some pretty significant withdrawal symptoms, including paranoia, anxiety, depression, really problematic things that when your loved one starts to hit those withdrawal symptoms, it could be so strong that they turn back to old reliable to make them go away. I mean, even, nicotine, if you stop using nicotine, there's withdrawal from that. Heck, even coffee, if you stop using caffeine, there's withdrawal from that as well. So speaking with your doctor can help you to come up with a plan to minimize those withdrawal symptoms and keep you strong as you're moving through recovery. The best thing that you can do, again, I've said it a couple times, I'm going to keep saying it, go get a formal assessment and evaluation. Substance use evaluation can be done, at the hospital. Doctors are trained in doing that. Fairbanks, Valley Vista, if you just Google substance use evaluation adolescent, you will find a place that will help you get that done. And oftentimes, like Fairbanks, I know for a fact, they'll give you that assessment for free. You just call them up, you make an appointment. You might have to sit and wait a minute, but they'll give you that assessment and that will give you some answers. The biggest indicator for success is taking that assessment and following the recommendations. I get a lot of people who will get an assessment or they'll get advice from their doctor and they'll say, all right, but I know my body, so I'm going to do this a little bit. Don't. Follow the recommendations. One thing that I would hear from guys that came through my program a lot is, you might know about addiction, but you don't know me. Well, that's true. But the drug, the addiction, it's always the same. It's always the same. That individual person, the faces, the names, the stories, they're different, but addiction is always the same. So when you have somebody that has the training to recognize the symptoms and to know what to do, it's best to listen to that person. So, well, sorry guys, technical issue, there we go. So that brings us to maintenance, which is one of my favorite phases on the stages of change. Maintenance is where your loved one realizes that recovery is possible. It's where they realize that they do in fact have the strength to do it. It takes people sometimes multiple tries to get here. They might go through the action phase, go through all these phases, get their treatment, even so far as going through the hospital to get their treatment, only to keep sliding back. Maintenance is a lifelong commitment. Addiction and substance use disorder are incurable. You will have them forever. That means that you can never return back to your substance of choice. And that is really difficult for people. Addiction is a very triggering disease. You never know exactly when, that trigger is going to come. And if you don't have the tools and the recovery underneath your belt, it's easy to slide back to where you were. But maintenance is kind of how you protect yourself from them. Maintenance is pretty simple. It means that every single day you are active in your recovery. Now, I would tell people all the time, because they would say, like, I don't really have time to be going to meetings. I don't really have time to talk to a sponsor. I don't really have time to do this. I don't have time to do that. I just want to get through my treatment and be done. If you try to fit recovery into your life, you will fail. It's just that simple. You have to fit your life into recovery. Recovery has to become the road that you walk from the second you wake up to the moment that you go to bed. Everything becomes about recovery. Working hard to keep that, that recovery and that sobriety. And then once you get to a point of strength, giving that to somebody else who needs it. That's maintenance. There are a lot of amazing meetings out there. I personally think that Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Heroin Anonymous, all of these things are miraculous. I have seen them take people from, their lowest moments where they had no hope to giving them a community and a family. I always loved to tell people that they have a whole family out there that they haven't met yet, and that's amazing. So, going to meetings and being active in your recovery is absolutely, absolutely critical to success. Now, this stage, it's my favorite because of the person it reminds me of. Back when I was doing home-based therapy, I was working with this mom, and I had been working with her for like a long time. We had about 9 months of sobriety under her belt. Her case was, getting to a place where it looked like it was going to close. Everything was kind of wrapping itself up. And, I was actually getting ready to close out her case as successful. One day, I go over to her house to, go over the case and start working on closure. And when I sit down, she's just got this look on her face, and I kind of had a red flag pop up that something wasn't right. And then she said, all right, listen, I'm going to tell you something, and you're not allowed to talk until I'm done. Huge red flag. Instantly, I'm nervous about what she's going to be saying to me. But I agree. So she tells me that, she's been going to her meetings, and, she's been working really hard, and she's, recognized the kind of recovery that she's been, earning, through blood, sweat, and tears. And that she knows she shouldn't date, but that she met somebody at the meetings and that it's been getting kind of serious. It is a well-known thing. You don't date, especially you don't date somebody that's going to your meetings with you, because if you so happen to break up, it can be very, very difficult for you to hold on to your sobriety. It can be one of the most difficult things. And then it makes your meetings awkward if you have to go see that person, which might keep you out of a meeting. So that's why these things are really, really frowned on. She knew that, which is why she was telling me. And she said, but this guy, he's really different. He's really nice. We're supporting each other in our recovery. He's got exactly as much recovery as I do. He takes me bowling. He takes me to this Italian restaurant that I really like. We even went out to watch this movie. And as she's telling me this, I'm formulating what I'm going to say in my head. And I'm getting ready to tell her, like, I'm glad that you found happiness. I'm glad that somebody's treating you that way. However, we need to be careful. But I don't know if it was fate or what, but before I could say anything at all, she gets a text. And she reads this text. She had an old flip phone. She reads this text, and I just see her face just collapse. And she hands the phone to me, and it was a friend of hers that she goes to meetings with. And the friend said, listen, I know we're supposed to be keeping these kind of things a secret, but I met this guy at the meetings, and he's really awesome. And he takes me to this Italian place that I really like. And we went bowling. And we went to go see this movie. And I know I should keep it a secret, but I just can't because he just makes me so happy. You can probably figure out what it was. It was the exact same guy. Now here I'm thinking, this is going to lead to a relapse. This is incredibly triggering. Not only is she, doing a dangerous thing in terms of dating while she's doing this, but she just got cheated on. She was just so excited. Her heart's going to be broken. I hope she doesn't turn back to old reliable to deal with that. And for a minute, she's quiet. And then she just looks at me and she says, we're going to talk this through, but I'm going to go get cookies first. And she goes into the kitchen and she plops this big bowl of cookies down on the table. And she tells me to eat a cookie. And I'm telling her how I'm not allowed to really accept food from anybody. And she just yells, eat a cookie. So then I ate a cookie. And then we sat there and we talked it through. And she told me how she was feeling hurt. And she told me that she was worried about her friend. And she told me how she was so angry. And then I asked her what she needs to do next. So she pulled out that flip phone. Now, guys, I am an adult male who on paper is, stable and put together, but she did what I probably would not be able to do in that situation. I would have lost my mind. I would have said terrible things. I would have gone off, but that's not what she did. She sent this man a simple text, and all it said was, I want you to know that I don't think that we should see each other anymore. I do feel that it might jeopardize both of our recoveries. I would appreciate it if you did not speak to me in meetings. Thanks. I wish you all the best. And then that's it. There was no seeking vengeance. There was no drama. There was no fight. There was nothing. That was her working her recovery. She took a emotionally traumatic and very potentially triggering moment. And instead of doing what she wanted to do, which was go use, she called on me and talked it through. And then she called her friend and helped her. And they talked it through. And then she went to a meeting. That's maintenance. That's maintenance. Again, you see a lot of beautiful things in this line of work. That is definitely in my top 10. I watched somebody who a year before, did not have their life together and absolutely would have been off to the races in an incident like that. And I watched her not only pick herself up and protect her recovery, which was more important to her, but I also watched her protect her friend as well. And I watched her do that in a mature way that I probably couldn't even do myself. This is the thing about substance use disorders. If you make it through these steps, you have that action plan, you get treatment, you talk to people in your meetings, you get yourself a sponsor, you walk the steps, you end up becoming an incredibly strong and resilient person. It is an inspiring thing to work in the field of substance use and addictions because you get to watch people become a better version of themselves. It's awesome. And that's what maintenance is. Now, that does bring us to this last stage, which is not technically a stage, and that's relapse. Now, we have a lot of things to say about relapse. People see relapse as a failure, and I want to tell you that it's not. As a caregiver, as somebody who cares about somebody who may or may not be using, this can be a really difficult and scary thing to see. If you're a person that you care about, your kiddo, goes through all these steps, they stop smoking weed, they stop using cigarettes, they stop drinking out, whatever it is that they're turning to, they get a year, 2 years, 3 years under their belt, and then you see that they've fallen again. That can be absolutely, absolutely devastating. It can be incredibly difficult to look them in the eye again, have that conversation again. And a lot of parents, a lot of caregivers and guardians end up blaming themselves over that. I don't want you to look at relapse as failure. Relapse is part of this. Every person that I talk to that's in addiction, I say to them, this is a lifelong disorder. This is a lifelong disease. Relapse is always around the corner. It's a tragedy, right? Like, relapse is never okay. It's never acceptable, but it's not a failure. It's a tragedy. When you start looking at it like it's a failure, you don't come back. The most important thing to do when you have that relapse is to get up, brush the dust off your shoulders and just keep trying. That's it. So now let's talk about specifically what parents can do. I know what you want to do. If you're a part of this call or you're watching this later, you're watching the recording later at home, you're probably great parents. You're here because you care about, the kids that you're looking after. And because you're great parents, that means that you're great teachers, right? You are adept at helping them when they have broken hearts. You're great at putting bandages on their skinned knees. That's what good parents do. But all those skills that make you a great parent can actually make things worse when we're talking about substance use disorder and addictions. The worst thing that you can do is have a confrontation. Showing them what they've done is wrong, yelling at them, screaming at them, cornering them in their room, showing them the vape rig that you found, all of those things. It's worked before. If they don't do their homework, you let them hear about it, right? Like, you have that firm boundary and you let them know that what they're doing is not acceptable. But when you're talking about substance use disorder, when you're talking about drugs, all you're doing is you're stressing them out and you're pushing them to this place where they have to cope. And what do they cope with but their drug? So what you've ensured that they're going to do is they're going to go use. Now, that's really, really a hard pill to swallow. I know that. So what you're also going to try to maybe do is teach them, because, great parents are great teachers, right? You've taught them everything they know. And so maybe if you just sit there and you give them the facts and you tell them, like, listen, weed is actually very dangerous for somebody your age. Weed can lead to anxiety, it can lead to depression. It's not a gateway drug, but it does, get your brain ready to just be more susceptible to being an addict. They're not going to listen to you, because when they're in that phase of pre-contemplation, you can't really reason with that. When they're in that phase of contemplation, they know that. And the fact that they still can't stop or won't stop or haven't made the commitment to stop makes them feel ashamed, makes them feel stupid. And so how are they going to cope with that strong feeling? Well, they're going to turn to the thing that they use to cope with everything. Punishment is the exact same. Now listen, have your strong boundaries, but don't punish them over their use. Don't say, all right, if you do this one more time, I'm going to call the cops. That's a confrontation. But if you do say to them, listen, if you use, I'm not going to have that in my house. Here's a boundary. If you're under the influence, I'm going to call the police just to make sure that you're protected and I'm protected. That's a boundary. There's a difference there. Now, here's why this works. As human beings, you can't really tell anybody what to do. As soon as you give somebody a command or an order, the first thing that they want to do is the exact opposite of what you just said. It's human reactance theory. We don't like that. For example, if I told you that Zoom has this new technology to where I can turn on all your cameras and make you show your face right now, I'm sure a lot of you would be pretty upset about that. I'd probably get a lot of you jumping off this call right now. I'm not going to do that, obviously, because People don't like to be told what to do. They rebel against that. So how you deal with that is you, instead of being confrontational, instead of talking down and explaining, instead of yelling at them, instead of making it difficult, you become a supportive person. Because you're a good parent, you are adept at being a supportive person. You've been doing it their whole life. Letting them know, I'm here with you every single step of the way. That's a lot different than screaming at them and saying, if I ever see this in my house again, you're going to hear about it. No, that puts too much on them. They need your help. This is hard. And saying, you're not alone when you do this, that might just give them the courage to push it a little bit further and actually stop. Another big part of that is understanding. So rather than, telling them that they shouldn't vape anymore because, it's deadly and it's dangerous and we don't know what it's doing and blah, 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 but you're also smoking, maybe say like, I think it's time that we both quit. I don't like that, I'm telling you not to use tobacco products, but here I am smoking. If they're having issues with alcohol and you have a lot of alcohol in the house, maybe it's time for you to dispose of that alcohol. Be a participant. Be with them as they're kicking their substance, as they're getting clean, as they're getting better. I just talked on and on and on and on about how miraculous meetings are. I have really good news. There are meetings for you as well, and you can go to those meetings while they're in theirs. Al-Anon meetings, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, AA meetings, there's usually what's called an Al-Anon meeting going on at the same time. That is parents, spouses, loved ones of people who are in addiction getting together and supporting each other. They have 12 steps too. They even have sponsors if you need them. And I can't tell you the power of going into a room, if you're a mom who's struggling with the fact that her kid keeps using, and sitting in a room with a bunch of other moms who are also struggling with the fact that their kid keeps using, that's empowering. And that's also a group of people who can hear where you are, hear your thinking, and help you to understand what you're doing and what you need to do. Those are the best advice givers. You never have to explain, you never have to be ashamed, because they already know all of it. So that's what you can do. I know that's a little bit frustrating because it goes against what you feel like you should do. When you find drugs in your kid's room, you're going to panic. You should panic. That's terrifying. If you find, they've come home and they're, fully intoxicated, that's a scary thing to deal with. That's a difficult thing to see. And you're going to want to react to that, and you're going to want to be emotional, and you're going to want to be afraid. But the best thing that you can do as a parent or guardian, as a loved one to that person, is to be supportive with them, stand next to them, and be a part of them getting clean. It's not going to be so easy as a one and done, I found out that you're using, it's time to get clean, it's over. It's not going to be that easy. It might take a long time. It might take years. But being that amazing parent or guardian that you are, if you're with them every step of the way, their chances of success go way through the roof. Now, look, I'm going to give you a disclaimer. A lot of these presentations that are talking about what I'm talking about come with statistics. And you might have noticed I didn't have any statistics. Stats for this aren't important. I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to want to go Google the recovery rates for adolescents who use alcohol, who use THC, etc. Don't do that, because those recovery rates aren't great. But those recovery rates don't mean anything for your kid. Back when I was working at the hospital, when I was working in Fairbanks, I would get guys who would ask me like, okay, well, what are my chances? What are my stats? Like, what does the research say about getting clean? And I'll tell you right now, the odds of getting clean, the statistics, a person using heroin, getting clean within a year is 2%. I didn't want them to know that number. I don't want you to know the number of kids that get clean. But invariably, they would find out, somebody would tell them, and I would say the same thing to them. That number doesn't represent you. Nobody knows your story yet. We can't predict the future. So here's a way to look at this. So let's take that 2% statistic. If I have a drawer that's filled with 100 marbles, and 2 of those marbles are blue, and I reach in blind, pull out a marble, hold it in front of my face, and then open up my hand, what is the probability that that marble is going to be blue? It's not 2%. It is 50-50, because you're not measuring that entire drawer of marbles. You're measuring that one marble, the one marble that matters to you, the one marble in your hand. So just like If you go and look at the statistics and you get bummed out because they're not great, you're not measuring all those kids. You're measuring yours. And if you do all of this and you understand where they are and you work with them and you be a parent and you always engage with them with love, then that stat is absolutely going to be irrelevant. So that's my presentation. In this weird Zoom world we're in, it went a little bit faster, but I do want to open up for questions. If you guys want to leave that in the chat, I'll go to answering those. Or you can unmute. So back when I was a teacher, one of my favorite things to do when I would ask a question and like the kids wouldn't answer the question or they wouldn't know or they wouldn't be brave enough to talk, I would just say, studies show that it takes the average high school student 30 seconds to respond. And I would just look at the clock and I'd start counting. I'd just use awkwardness as a weapon. It was always great. Okay. Well, tell you what, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. My email is in the chat. I just got a question here. Are there teenage meetings? There absolutely are. There's teen versions of, Al-Anon. There's teen versions of AA, teen versions of NA, CMA, all of the A's. They're a little bit harder to find. I will say if you can find a teen version, I would try to go with that. You can actually get on and Google, teen AA, and they'll pop up. But no one's going to be turned away from an AA meeting. No one's going to be turned away from an NA meeting or what have you. The point is that you're there. And if your kiddo needs it and they need that place to be supported and they need that place to talk, man, just take them. The worst case scenario, someone in that meeting will probably know a better meeting and a more age appropriate meeting. But do understand that, putting them in that room, there might be some topics that are a little bit rough and raw to hear. Okay. All right, guys. Looks like we're getting another question in. So what do you do if your kid comes up with a creative alternative, such as using CBD rather than smoking weed, but the goal is just to get to college? Okay, I'm really glad this question came up. I think it's awesome. I hear that a lot. One of the most frustrating things in addictions and recovery treatment is somebody kind of coming up with their own plan. I will tell you this, if you didn't hear that plan from somebody that has expertise in addiction, it's probably not going to hold water. And I would also hear a lot, guys would come in with, an issue with heroin or what have you. And they say like, well, I'll just smoke pot because if I smoke pot, it's safer than doing heroin. It's fine. It's super not fine. You're not going to drug your way out of a drug problem. I'll also say about CBD, now I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit. I personally would not endorse the use of CBD products. Part of that is because right now, like 2020 right now, it is not an FDA, it hasn't been vetted by the FDA, which means you don't ever really know what you're getting. And, it's kind of like the Wild West right now. Some of these preparations, some of these mixtures are, fine and safe and, they're okay. They're in the right levels. And some of them way aren't. Also, just the use of a vape for somebody young is pretty dangerous. So if they're using CBD, especially if they're vaping it, there can be a lot of damage that comes from that. Now I'll tell you this story. I was working with this mom and, she got her case open because she was pregnant and she used THC. She swore off of it. She gave me like 100 clean screens. We worked really hard together. And, she was really dealing with her anxiety. So she decided to try THC decided to try CBD. But the preparation that she got actually had some trace elements of THC in it. That's not common, but it does happen. So the next time I went to screen her, there was the smallest, ittiest, bittiest, tiniest trace of THC. And that was enough. That was enough to set us back by quite a lot. Is there a way to tell if gummies are the THC gummies? I can't quite answer that. I will say that a lot of THC products and CBD products and so on and so forth are kind of designed to be disguised. If you're really concerned about something, man, Google image search is your best friend. Google image search THC gummies, take a look at what you're seeing. And if you're really, really that concerned about it, they're gummies, get rid of them. So there's one question that I actually want to, I haven't gotten it yet, but I do want to bring it up. I've given a lot of parent nights and I've talked to a lot of, spouses, moms, dads, whatever. And one question that always comes up is, how do I rebuild trust? That is a really difficult question, but I think it's a really important one. The first thing that I'm going to say is I know a lot of parents and guardians who drive themselves absolutely crazy trying to prove that their kid isn't using anymore. You can't prove that. The only way to know for sure that your kid's not using is to screen them, which I do recommend. You can buy THC screens, even nicotine screens, pretty cheaply on Amazon. But, if you're constantly searching their room, constantly questioning them, constantly cornering them just to prove to yourself that they're doing what they need to be doing, ultimately you're kind of sabotaging things. The only way that trust can be rebuilt is through time. So I have this big, long story about this dog that I had. Now, bear with me because this is a dumb story, but it's going to make sense. When I graduated from high school, I decided that I wanted to go hiking on the Appalachian Trail. And, I went by myself, which is dumb, had my whole pack. And I was 3 days out, and this beautiful white dog comes out of the woods. And it had no collar on, no tags, but it did have a bandana. So I knew this was somebody's dog, but there was no tags. And the dog looked like it was absolutely starving. I could see its ribs. It looked hungry, and it was a dog, right? It greeted me all happy. It was all tongues and tails, and my heart just broke for this dog. So I reached into my pack, and I pulled out a Cliff Bar. And I unwrapped it halfway, and I stuck it out for the dog to take. And the dog bit into it right away because it was starving. And I pulled my hand back so that I could take the wrapper the rest of the way off. Now you can probably guess what happened. That dog bit me pretty bad. I still have a scar. It still kind of acts up sometimes. It was a bad bite, but it wasn't really that dog's fault, was it? What I ended up doing in that moment was I took food out of the mouth of a starving animal. And of course it bit me. And it bit me because it wasn't in its right mind. Now I took that dog home and I, took that dog to the vet. We rehabilitated that dog, and that dog died a couple years ago, fat and happy. That's one of the best dogs that I've ever owned in my entire life. I gauge all the dogs I will ever have by that white dog that I found in the Appalachian Trail. I'm getting kind of choked up talking about it. It doesn't matter that it bit me. I mean, it matters, but it doesn't, because I know that when that dog bit me, it wasn't itself. And all those terrible things that happen when a person is in addiction, when a person is suffering, they'll do anything to get their drug, right? That's how strong the cravings are. That's what addiction is. You'll cross lines that you would have never thought you would cross in a million years. But that's because in that moment, they're a starving animal. But deep down, they're still that good person that you know. If you're invested, and you don't have to be, but if you want to remain invested with that person that you care about, even after they've hurt you, even after they've broken your rules and said and done terrible things in the name of continuing to use, time will heal those wounds. And as they become sober and as they become clean, that person who you knew and loved so much will come back up to the surface. It does just take time. All right, any other questions? Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming. Again, if you have any questions, my email is in the chat. It's Mark Pardue, MARK PARDUE at msdlt.k12.in.us. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and chill out. If any of you have any further questions, I'll be here. Feel free to directly message me. If not, you have my email. Don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks.
Thank you.